Things are going to start happening to me now.
You've done all the reading. You're a scholar, you're a professor. You've done all the reading. You've done the intellectual heavy lifting.
More or less, eat shit and die.
You wouldn't know a fact if it begged you all night long.
Want to like, give the wrong impression because I am very high.
Ran up behind him with a hatchet, smash, smash, smash.
Yeah, care. I'm a libertarian. What I'm getting is,
Did you vote for Joe Jorgensen or Trump?
Who?
Joe Jorgensen. That was the perfect answer. Thank you. That
Oh boy. Welcome everybody to the Libertarian Podcast Review. This is Tyler Yonke. We give you the autistic stars you just didn't know you needed in your life. Tonight's going to be a little bit different because, I don't know, Dave qualifies as very autistic. But if you're looking and you're listening or you're watching this, you're only thinking of one or two things. Tyler, you've made it. Or Dave, you've really done bad for yourself. Dave Smith, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you for having me. And I'm a fan of this show. I've watched several episodes and enjoyed it.
That's crazy. So that's something Toad would not believe. So I appreciate you saying that. And by the way, I'm glad you did. I was just telling you backstage that the one strike I have got was playing a clip of you on Joe Rogan, which you in the Fauci portion. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. I didn't know. Was it because it was off of the non-YouTube portion that you're not supposed to put on YouTube, or what was it?
Maybe.
Or just was it the content?
No, because it wasn't from Joe Rogan. It was for the content. It was a portion that you guys, when you were on there, and the whole thing blew up about Fauci, and you had some back and forth, and I played that portion, and they did not like that. I appealed, but it didn't matter. So it's just the way it is. So it doesn't matter. That, by the way, just two real quick things. That's on Odyssey. And I also, this could get me taken. I did also rip your interview with Glenn Beck, the full one. It's up on Odyssey as well. So if people are looking for that behind the paywall, I don't know how we feel about IP. So there you go.
Yeah, well, hopefully next time I'm out there in Dallas, he'll put me on the show that he releases, not behind the paywall. But yeah. I do not condone you stealing Glenn Beck's intellectual property, but I also do not condemn it.
Well, it was a really good interview, and I wanted people to actually see it. For me, I've been a kind of came up through the right side of politics, and it was a big. Glenn Beck actually helped get me to the libertarian world in a weird way. So it was really good to see you there, and I knew listening to it, there were a few things that you said that were just. You talked about the progressive era. I think he just got a Woody while he was talking to you, and mocking Wilson. So very good job talking to him in his way.
Well, I kind of like, dude, there's something, my whole career, man, there's like surreal things that fucking happen because I was like a political junkie and just completely obsessed with all this libertarian stuff, before I was anybody in this world or had any following or anything like that. And I remember, that was like when I was coming of age. Glenn Beck was the guy who, like, on the 5 o'clock hour was like rivaling the biggest numbers in cable news, and everyone was flipping out because he was talking about all this crazy shit. And so I know exactly who Glenn Beck is, and so I also knew what I was doing with that. Like, I knew this is the way to talk to this guy, to be like, hey, you're the anti-progressive, anti-original progressive error. Well, here's the most anti-progressive error like thing you could think. And it was so interesting. It was just interesting to hear this guy, tell me, and I didn't even really push him that hard. He kind of just offered it. He was like, I was completely wrong about the Iraq War and the Patriot Act and all this stuff. And it was just kind of, it was one of the moments in my career that I was like, this is kind of a surreal moment. But also, as much as I give him credit for it, you're also like, dude, how did you were talking about FEMA camps and shit, but supporting the Patriot Act? Like, how could you do both of those? How it's just but anyway, I really did. He was really great, and also just like off camera, like a super nice, humble person who was so friendly and like it, just he was a really cool guy from the little time I got to hang out with him.
So with that comment, I want to kind of talk to you about your same thing that you have in the liberty world, maybe a little bit less, but it's kind of like kingmaker in a sense, right? You took in Clint. He comes up and Reed and some of these others. And
I've made mistakes. Yes.
Yeah. And we'll talk about some of those. I've got a clip or two here. No, but so your ability and your willingness to do that. Clint's done that to a bunch of people that have come on the show for I mean, it's baffling, but nice off camera as well. So I think that's an important thing to go forward. How do you deal with that as far as like when you go to all these places and, you go to the Glenn Beck thing, and I'm sure that's an amazing experience. You go to the Pork Fest or wherever else you go and you get inundated. Has it been mostly a good situation?
Yeah, I enjoy that stuff. I don't know. Maybe it's just kind of like my nature. Like I like, I'm a people person. I like meeting people, and I like, and I feel I feel almost like this sense of which probably is just my nature, but I also feel this kind of like I'm very, very lucky. Like I have I'm able to support my family doing what I love to do. I love doing stand-up comedy, and I love podcasting, and I love, like, everything I do I love. And the reason I'm able to do it, and the reason I can support my family off of it, is because of all the people who listen and support me. So I just feel this sense of, like, if I'm out at an event and 200 people want to, shake my hand and take a picture after the event, what type of asshole would I be to not want to, you know what I mean? Like, these are the people who support my dream and all this. So that I feel that sense, but also I just kind of enjoy doing it. I enjoy meeting all the people. I'm very interested in who are you who listens to me, and who are you who's in this libertarian world or in this world of being a comedy fan. And I enjoy that. So that's never like a chore for me. I always enjoy that stuff. And I very much just feel like so many people, like heroes of mine, have just been really cool people to me. And that's part of what's helped, give me the career I have. And I enjoy that. I like helping someone else out or being cool to them, and I try. It's a cool position to be in, where someone who really deserves it, I'll see someone like Clint's a great example of that. Someone who you go like, oh, this guy's really good at what he does, and I can get more eyes on him. That's a cool thing to be able to do. So I enjoy doing that. It's a beautiful position that I somehow found myself in.
Yeah, and so I came upon you and Dr. Paul, and I took a picture and I posted it out kind of for his birthday, because I walked up and you guys were talking, and I swear this is what it was. You guys were arguing about who is nicer and more deserving. No, you are. And Dan McAdams like, okay, well, I am. Let's just leave. So it was a very interesting. I called it the torchbearer transferring of that, the from one to another, because to me that's what that conversation was. I was a little late to it, but what's your remembrance of that?
Yeah, so it was it was the night after, what was it, Friday night or Saturday night when we had the event, whatever the Take Human Action event was, where me and Ron Paul and Tom Woods and Dan McAdams and Scott Horton, everybody spoke. And then it was the next morning, and basically it was this really cool time. This was out in Reno for the National Libertarian Convention. Right. So basically, by the close of business, we had figured out that it was ours. Like, just, none of the elections had happened yet, but the delegates had all been seated and the agenda had been set, and it was like, here you go. Supermajority Mises Caucus. Tomorrow, the first things that's happening is we're voting on all of these positions. So it was almost like the takeover had happened, but was not completed, And then we had this event at night with all of these, legends, Tom Woods and Ron Paul and all these guys speaking. And so we went, and we just incredible. It was something, 1,000 something people, and all the speeches were great. And Ron Paul closes out the night, and here's this guy who's in his late 80s, and just gives the greatest speech ever about everything that's going on right now, and knows everything, and it's just so incredible, so inspiring. That Ron Paul gets up there and is talking about how Russia and China just met with Saudi Arabia, talking about moving away from the dollar reserve currency, and you're like, God damn, this guy's up on what's happening right now. Like, he's so, it's just so incredible.
While he was talking, did you ever in your mind go, Biden can't do this right now. I mean, the dichotomy of seeing the two mental states was crazy.
Ron Paul. So I
My
introduced
wife leaned
him.
over and said that to me at the time. So
Well, I introduced him, and he was walking up to the stage, and the way the stage was set up, there were kind of like two stairs, but there were no handrails. Like there's just two stairs, and he's just walking over, and I'm like, Ron Paul, everybody, and I'm just looking over like my hero coming up here, and then as he got to the bottom of the stairs, he kind of reached up, like, give me a hand up these stairs, and I had this moment where I was like, oh yeah, you're almost 90. Like, oh yeah, I should be helping you up this stair right now. Because in my mind, this guy's like fucking Superman. It's like never even occurred to me that I need to give you a hand up the stair. And then he just gives the greatest speech ever. He's just smarter than all of us and sharper and more well-read than all of us. It was incredible. So then the next morning, I don't even remember exactly, but I think I was walking down to like the Starbucks in the hotel lobby, and I happened to just walk by, and there's Daniel McAdams and Ron Paul and them. They're coming out, and they got their bags and stuff, and they're getting ready to go fly out back home. And so I saw all of them and said hi to Annie, and me and Ron Paul just started talking. And I remember, and he had said a few really nice things to me the night before. And I gave a speech and then introduced him, so he heard my whole speech and stuff. And I've done the Ron Paul Liberty Report, and he knows me a little bit. But so he came up to me and he was just like, your speech last night was incredible. It's amazing what you guys are doing. And he goes, when I was running in 1988 for the Libertarian Party, we used to go around to these events and there'd be like 12 people there if we were lucky. And now look at you guys. You guys are drawing thousands of people and doing these huge events. And it's just amazing. What you guys are doing is so incredible. And I was like, yeah, well, the reason is you. Like, you're the reason why it's thousands of people now and not just, 12 people. And he was, classic Ron Paul. He was like, no. It's lots of people. It has very little to do with me. And I was like, no. It's you. It's everything you did. That's why this is a huge thing now. And then he was like, no, you're drawing the people. It's because of you. And it was this very kind of weird, but such a sweet little moment. But I also wouldn't let him just say it's because of me. I was like, no, I insist. It's because of you. And then I was able to have, which I've had a couple moments with him like this before, but I was able to have a moment where I really just said, look, I forget exactly how I said, but I was like, look, you can keep saying it's me, and I'll keep saying it's you, but I just want to tell you from the bottom of my heart, thank you for everything you've done. It means the world to me. And he was like, I appreciate that very much. And then, as you said, Dan McAdams was like, tapping his watch, like, okay, listen, this is all great. Right. Nice love fest. We got to get out of here. And they did. But I love those guys, Daniel McAdams and Ron Paul. They're just really just incredibly great human beings. And then, of course, as we're having this conversation, everyone's coming up to take pictures with Ron Paul. Like, it got interrupted 17 times because people run into him and just want to take pictures with him and stuff. But it was beautiful. Yeah, that was cool that you got that picture of that moment. Yeah,
and then I shook his hand, but like you said, then McAdams is basically pulling away, but Dr. Paul's like, hey.
Because if you don't, that's Ron Paul's thing. If you don't, he'll just keep doing it forever. Right. He's like me, in that sense. He's so happy to just talk and hang the whole time that if Dan wasn't doing that, it would be another 3 hours and they'd miss their flight.
So if you didn't have any kind of ability to reflect on your own self, and you see him doing this and you're not that kind of person, you would kind of think of yourself as a shitty person, right? I mean, here's this amazing person that you're trying to be. So for me personally, it was good to see that you at least emulated that yourself somewhat, mostly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it'd be a shitty person. I know people who are social introverts and stuff who don't do well in those situations. So I don't know if that makes you shitty. Sometimes people are uncomfortable with that stuff. I'm just not. I'm very comfortable, with a crowd or with people or whatever. So I don't know exactly if it makes you shitty, but it is cool if you can do that for people, especially if that means something to them.
Right. Okay. We'll agree to be okay on that one. Two quick things. So since I got more of a big crowd here, you've been on Kill Tony, right? I mean, I saw it on there. Fantastic. Love that show. So
I've been on there a few times. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll go back in the archives, Dave. I've only gone so far back. I have actually gone all the way back because William Montgomery fascinates me. So is he as scary in person, after the show?
Yes. Yes.
That's solid.
Scarier.
Okay. Is he ever going to be on Legion of Skanks?
Possible. I don't know. I could see that happening.
I'd like. Okay. So we do one of these once a month. Andy and I, we do it next week. It's on the 13th of September is our next one. So people, you sign up, you can rant. It's not comedy. It's whatever you want for a minute, and then we kind of mock you. So check that out. Another thing I'm doing is...
Oh, I like that. That's a cool idea.
Yeah, so it was a train wreck last time. We had a resident homeless guy, P Nord, come on. He talked about being homeless, and then followed up by Toad ripping the homeless and talking about how they're like rats in Boston. You don't get that everywhere, Dave.
Everyone knows I've been team homeless this whole time.
Right. And one other thing I'm doing is I'm really trying to push. I'm a family law attorney, and I'm trying to come up with some things for parents' rights, custody stuff in the libertarian world. I'm just now kind of thinking about it, and I know a lot of other people are much further along than me. So if you have some suggestions, some thoughts, and I don't know, Dave, do you have anything on family law, like parents' rights? My big problem with what I do is I just think men don't prepare for litigation as they should, so they just get railroaded in court. California is much different than other states as far as rights. But what's kind of your take on the issue itself? And then you're probably only dealing with it with Lewis.
Yeah, I'm suing for Lewis's child, and I have no claim to the kid, but we all know he'd be better off with me. Lewis' kid really is goddamn adorable. By the way, Lewis just gave him a cell phone, but he only lets him have it like when he's out or like on a trip, so in case he gets lost.
Yeah.
So they're out in Italy right now, and he gave him the cell phone for the first time in his life, and he's just been texting me all day. He's 10, and he's like, Uncle Dave, I have a cell phone, I can text you now. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And he's like, what are you doing? And they'll just text me like random, but like a 10-year-old way where they don't quite get how to text or talk, or
you're gonna get like 4 lines of emojis and
I mean, I think that there's I certainly think that the laws are very biased against fathers, and that it's a real shame, and that I think fathers should have like complete equal rights to parental, everything. But I think the kind of bigger issue there is just that I think we should have much more of a culture of like of stigmatizing divorce. And that's not to say, I know a lot of great people have been through divorces. I'm not saying like that you're a bad person if you've been through a divorce. I'm just saying that I think we have a culture of kind of and particularly if you have kids. I don't really care if you don't have kids. I don't even consider it a marriage if you don't have kids. Like whatever. But if you have kids, there should be a lot of, I think, because libertarians don't believe in the law and force being what does it, I think that there should be a lot of pressure that like you really have an obligation to raise those kids together. And we kind of have, for I think probably 4 or 5 decades now, normalized the idea of just like, hey, if it's not working, then don't do it together. And there's a real, in the same way, in many ways with the sexual revolution, the feminist revolution, and just kind of like modern day culture, it's like we're lying to people. Like we're not telling them the truth. It's like, hey, if you're not happy, then just go your separate ways, and that's fine too. But the truth is, for anyone who's had kids and been divorced, and they know this, it's like, no, life is going to be way harder. It's going to be way more brutal if you do this. So maybe let's encourage you don't do this. But in terms of like the legal aspect, I mean, you probably know a lot more of it than me, but I do think that my belief would be that like both parents should have an equal claim to, custody of the kids. And I don't think that's the way it works. And I think alimony is bullshit. I completely believe in child support. I think, in fact, when the whole abortion conversation comes up and a lot of people would go, the kind of pro-choice people trying to own the pro-life people would be like, oh, so if you're saying that the woman can't have an abortion, do you think the man owes the woman child support during the 9 months she's pregnant? And I'm like, yep, I sure do. I sure do think that you have to support that chick. If you get a chick pregnant, I absolutely think you have to support her through her whole pregnancy. I think you should be legally obligated to do that. Yes. So I don't know. That's kind of my take on it.
Perfect. And my problem is I just don't always know the solutions. And so I kind of want the Libertarian Party to start thinking about this, because I think it could be a vital and by the way, I'm just out there doing my job every day, and I'm not looking for solutions from a libertarian side necessarily. So people, you can DM me on this. Okay, let's. I would be Brian Stelter if I didn't bring up one thing. And by the way, I noticed you didn't have a podcast today, although you were on there with Kilstein on Yo MMA Rap. I guess I should have said all your podcasting.
Yeah, I did record a podcast today. It'll be out tomorrow, but
okay.
I recorded with Kilstein yesterday. Yes.
Okay, so what is your take on the LPNH tweets, Dave Smith?
Well, you know, those New Hampshire guys are fucking crazy. I don't know what to say. Right. I spoke with a bunch of them earlier today. You know, I think that I think New Hampshire is an interesting case. I think that when they hit, they're probably the absolute best. You know, but they're also likely to go over the line. I think like Jeremy Kaufman's "War is Gay" commercial is probably the best like piece of libertarian content that I've seen in the last year. It's just perfect. And all the people who are like offended by it, like this is anti-LGBT, it's like, shut the fuck up. You know exactly what that message was because it was so clear. The message is like the military-industrial complex cloaks their bullshit behind this wokeism, and then you're supposed to be like, yeah, that's what matters. What matters is like whether there's transgenders dropping the bombs, and obviously what really matters is who the bombs are being dropped on. I will say that, you know, the Meghan McCain one, I understand where people were upset with it. I understand why they did it. I do think, and I think they acknowledge as well, I think the 6 million one missed the mark. And you don't want to be doing that shit from blue check like LP accounts. You don't want to like give the impression that what we're really trying to say is this. And so I think they had a tweet today that was kind of like, hey, just so you guys know, that's not what we were trying to say. And so I appreciated them kind of adding that. You know, the fact is that like we want to go for it and we want to be bold and we want to push the limits. But that doesn't mean that every time you're bold and push the limits, you're nailing it perfectly. And I think stuff like that one, I think missed the mark. But I also appreciate them kind of, you know, tweeting that like, yeah, we missed the mark a little bit with that one. Okay, whatever. And not being bitches and like apologizing about it, but just being like, yeah, okay, this is what we meant. If you took it this way, fine. The thing that's bugged me a little bit is that I think, I'll say this, and this is why I tweeted something kind of to this effect the other day. What's bugged me about the response to the McCain tweet and the other one is that I don't want to see a thing where we're throwing people under the bus who don't deserve to be thrown under the bus. So what bugged me was like when Spike Cohen said, and I think it's completely reasonable for Spike Cohen to say about the McCain tweet, go, dude, maybe let's not have a picture of a daughter crying over her father's corpse, because that might be taken the wrong way. Well,
how do you know whose corpse it is?
But look, he goes, look, that's like not the best way to message the anti-war shit. And then people are like trashing Spike, and it's like, dude, don't fucking do that. Spike fucking spoke up when they stole the fucking party from you guys and really helped put a lot of pressure on them to make sure you got it back. Don't make someone an enemy just because they're like, hey, I don't think this is the right way to do it. So I don't like that. I also don't like the people, you know, who are like, you know, flipping out. Like there's also the people there who are more outraged about this tweet than I've ever seen them outraged about anything that actually matters. And so, you know, it's like, but at the same time, what I think a tweet or a message or anything like that misses the mark if the end result is like the people who shouldn't be fighting. So the goal should probably always be to kind of like channel at least most of us in the right direction. I don't know. Maybe that's not the best answer, but I think that we, especially now, it's kind of like a new time in this movement. I don't want us to water anything down. I don't want us to like be soft in any way. I think we have to be aggressive and like radical and with all of our messaging. But at the same time, I don't want to make enemies out of people who I think are like, you know, really great people and really powerful allies. So I saw a lot of shit after the McCain tweet where like, you know, Lydia from Tim Pool's show didn't like the McCain tweet. And then I see her getting like pounced on by our people. And I just wish that like some of our people, like I'd be like, guys, look, okay, maybe you disagree with her about this, like her take on that tweet. Fine, whatever. But wouldn't you at least step back and go, hey, this is somebody who's booked me and Angela and Michael Malice and Scott Horton and Clint Russell and Michael Heiss and Maj Touré and like all these people and put them in front of like 1 million people. Wouldn't that be enough to just go, okay, you disagree with her on this tweet. Let's not try to like pounce on her. Like that, I think we need to be a little bit smarter about some of this stuff. Like New Hampshire isn't going to be for everyone, and it's going to be way for some people. That's fine. But let's try to at least be a little bit smart in terms of like what our bigger like movement is here, and try to like, you know, like there are some people who deserve to be fucking trashed, and then there are some people who like they deserve a pass. Spike deserves a pass. You know, like Spike's he's one of our guys. Lydia's one of our guys. That's more what I'd like to say. Does that make sense?
It does. Now, and I kind of differ with you, and it totally makes sense from a kind of a professional level, right? You've got two faces of Dave Smith. You've got the Legion of Skanks, I'm in your face, the most offensive podcast, and then you've got Dave Smith, the LP guy. So at some point, you've got some of your followers who maybe are a little more edgy. I didn't really care about the tweet. I had more of a problem with people that would shit on, and by the way, I don't like, you know, Biden or whatever, but they'll shit on their families, Biden, Clintons, and then this is over the line. And to me, I had a problem, and I kind of went after some of those people. And you know what? I'm going to play you a clip here because I think this guy actually, let's see if we can, here we go.
At the very least, right? Like, I think that, so what I've seen, and I've talked about this a bit on my show before, right? But even if you're going to be a libertarian, like Dan McAdams made this point in a speech that he gave, I think it was at the Mises Institute. I can't exactly remember. It was a couple of years ago, where he was basically saying that his rule is never do the bidding of the regime. So no matter what, you know, if you're a libertarian in the year.
Okay, so that to me was the perfect answer for this from the libertarian side, which is this is out there. I'm not going to shit on the Libertarian Party for doing this. I'm just going to let it go. And so Lydia and some of the non-libertarians, okay, I get it. But the ones in the party that are, you know, the based ones that are so coming after this, I had more of a problem with them. And I thought your approach, you weren't necessarily talking about this. That's the way to go. Just let it dangle and don't attack from either side. What do you think?
Yeah, if I ever have a problem with the New Hampshire guys or something like that, I'm gonna talk to them. I'm not gonna fucking jump in a pylon and fucking like make a whole thing out of it. And so yes, I think that handsome gentleman you just played made a very good point. And that's it. But at the same time, I would also say that I'm not gonna like I did make a tweet saying like, hey, fucking lay off Justin, lay off Spike on this. I don't think it's right to be like going after those guys. Cause like, I just say, for me, I'm very loyal, and I'm very much like it, for as much as I think I'm kind of known for fighting with other libertarians, which I've done a lot of. But if you check my track record on this, with the exception of like when there's libertarian presidential candidates who are running and absolutely fucking up. Like I've criticized them pretty hard. But with the exception of that, I'm always on defense. Like I've never just gone at any other libertarian in a vicious way until they come at me in a vicious way like that. Like I will respond. Like even today, I responded to a certain based libertarian group because they made a video trashing the LP messaging. And I think I said something like, this is very shallow analysis. And then they came back at me, and I said, for a reason. I said, hey, here's the reason. Here's what the tweet meant. Here's what this is. This is very shallow analysis because you guys don't really know, what you're talking about. I didn't say that. I just said very shallow analysis. And then they're like, you're unprofessional and you're not serious and you need to get better at messaging. And then I'm like, oh, okay. Well, now I'm going to try. And in general, that's how I've been the whole time. Even with like the fucking crazy, really deranged, woke libertarians who have said every awful thing about me. If you go back to the beginning, I always kind of approached them with like, listen, Let me come at you in good faith. And then as soon as like, if you're vicious to me, I'll be very vicious back to you. But I do feel like with guys like Justin Amash really jumped on the New Hampshire guys. I get that. But at the same time, I look at that and I go, look, Justin Amash came out and publicly stood up for the New Hampshire guys when the party was stolen from them to get the party returned back to them. And so and people say, well, he only did that for this reasons or that reasons. But look, the old LNC, before we took over the party, they wanted, with the exception of Karen Ann and Josh Smith, the whole rest of the LNC, they desperately wanted Justin Amash to be the face of the party. And the new Libertarian Party really wants me to be the face of the Libertarian Party. And he sided with our guys. Even though the other guys were all his guys, you got to give him some credit for that, man. And so if he would do that, and by the way, that was a huge part. That was a huge part of why New Hampshire got the fucking party back. Because basically the old LNC, who wanted to steal it, conspired in the effort to steal it. Even they felt shamed into it because they were like, shit, even Justin Amash is coming out and being like, you can't do this. So I just go, for that, if he wants to come out and criticize a tweet, which from the Justin Amash perspective, you have to completely understand why he didn't like that tweet. That's not his type of fucking messaging, you know? And so I just went, he doesn't deserve to be pounced on for this. So in the same way that I'll defend the New Hampshire guys, I'll also defend Justin Amash. I'll really defend Spike Cohen, you know, and so that's kind of like where I fall with all this shit. At the end of the day, I'm not going to fucking harp on it for too long. I'm like, that was my tweet thread. It was like, okay, don't shit on Justin. Don't shit on, Spike. Fuck the McCains. Let's move on. Right. That's my take on the whole thing.
Totally agree. Dave, I've got a few random questions. What kind of training have you done to make sure you don't say fuck while on Fox News?
I don't know. I've managed not to so far. So I haven't really done much training. I just, you don't have much time there. So it's easy to just, it's always like, hey, the most important question in the world, you have 60 seconds. So I'm like, okay, let me say it in a kind of professional way. I didn't curse when I was on the Ron Paul Liberty Report either. Sometimes you just like, I'm good at, when I'm in like a professional environment, being professional. And then when I'm not, being myself.
That's amazing. Yeah, good for you. Okay, so the whole reason I roped you into this, and now I'm deviating off of here with questions. But you never know when you're going to come back, Dave. So I have to get these questions. This is probably it. I appreciate it.
I'm kidding. I'll come back, Tyler.
Oh well, that's. By the way, there's some in the Tower Gang chat group that I'm in that maybe are still trying to get you to come on their shows. So I'm not going to shame you on this, but.
Have I not done all of their shows yet? Have I not completed the tower?
I don't know. Right. I don't know. Okay. So we're going to talk about Michael Shermer and this interview with Nick Gillespie. Now, I think Nick's great personally. I have some differences with him, but I actually love his interviewing. And I just talked to Brian McWilliams. By the way, sorry to deviate here. Lions of Liberty, they're gone from what they were, announced as of yesterday. Mikhail Gorbachev dies today. Which one are you more upset about?
Oh, wow. That's a good point. Who's done more damage for liberty? I don't know. I'd have to say. I don't know. They both had some positive aspects to their legacy. So now Lions of Liberty, from what I understand, is not gone, but Mark Claire is leaving. Right. So I love Mark. And I wish him the best of luck on his new journey. And I know he's moved away from libertarianism, and that's, disappointing and wrong and very, very gay, but I hope that he does well in his next venture. I love Mark Claire. He's a great guy. I love Brian. I love John. I love all those guys. So I wish nothing but success for all of them and for the Gorbachevs. I also wish success for them.
Especially his daughter. Brian McWilliams, I sat by him in Reno. We sat together, so we had a nice bond, and I talked to him on Friday. We did a podcast, and he was telling me, he's like, look, we got this with Mark. He's like, this whole week, Robbie hasn't been on part of the problem. But luckily you saved the whole situation, the rumor mill on Friday with Robbie coming back. So we were worried.
Maybe that was going to be it. That would have been fucking something, huh? If I just fucking stole Mark Claire from the Lions of Liberty.
Right. That's what it would have been.
No,
okay.
I was never interested.
Not with that hair. Okay, so we've got Shermer on here. Nick Gillespie had Penn Jillette. I'm not to do this to trash Nick and Reason personally, because I think at some point Nick is unwittingly being a libertarian slayer. I mean, of some sort, or these faux libertarians, by showing them. I mean, I don't know that he meant to do this with Penn or Shermer, but for me, did you watch the whole interview yet, or is this your?
So I saw. So when you, I didn't even like note that they did this. But when you messaged me and said, "Hey, do you want to come on and do like a response to this video?" And I said to you, which I thought was a joke that you did not appreciate. But I said, how brutal is it on a scale of 1 to 10?
Right.
And you said, which I thought was great, right? 1 to 10. Yeah. And you just, in a classic libertarian autistic way, you went about a 7.
Yeah. Well.
And you know what? After I watched some of it, I didn't watch the whole thing, and I kind of had it in the background. My wife and daughter were out, but I was with my baby boy, and I had it playing like in my phone in the background. So I didn't like watch it like super focused the whole time, but I had it on in the background, and I would agree it was about a 7. It was really pretty bad, but not like on the level of that Penn Jillette interview that was like Jesus Christ, but still bad. And like, I don't know. Should I give my overall thoughts on the thing before we get into the?
And by the way, there's a, and we'll play it here. He's really interested in consistency. So the most consistent motherfucker we know, you, Dave Smith, is going to critique the baseline of consistency here. What's your
right? So I guess my big takeaway from it, and I don't know that much about this dude. Like I mean, I'm aware of him, you know, and like I was aware. I know of Skeptic Magazine, and I've seen videos he's done over the years. And the thing that really stuck out to me is like, so he's kind of like, his thing is that he is the science guy, the rationalist, you know, I'm just here to just be like pure logic and reason and evidence-based and all of this. And the whole interview, it's just such mushy nothingness. Like, no guiding principles, nothing is rooted in any type of like, well, look, I got from this point to this point to this point. It's just this kind of like, well, this feels right, and then I guess this feels right, and then constantly talking about these different camps with no understanding of what their actual ideological views are. And, you know, one of the things that's really so, and like shit. Well, I was shitting on these guys earlier today. Again, only because they came at me. But you watch some of these people out there who are like doing a video on whatever, whether Liz Cheney should go to prison. And their video right there is they're like, well, the anarchist thinks they should go to prison. Like, well, you're an anarchist and you believe in prison? I mean, that seems kind of contradictory. And you're like, oh, so you have no idea. Like, you're going to do a thing on this, and you have no idea what you're talking about. You haven't read the first thing about this. You go, well, like, someone going to prison for what they believe, that's kind of like a government intervention into the marketplace. And you're like, wow. So that's kind of how I felt about him. Like, you're supposed to be the like rational adult in the room, Mr. Science guy who reports on this. And this is the bizarre world we live in, where his lack of understanding of theory is like, and I understand you could say, we care about theory too much. Who the fuck gives a shit? But I'm just saying that that's what he's supposed to be, the rational guy. I could, Tyler, talk to any one of the members of the Tower Power Hour, and they would be more rooted in they would get the theory more. They've done more of their homework and know more about like what the logical argument of all this shit is than them. And that's what's so bizarre about this. And a lot of those guys will be like, but you tweeted this horrible thing. I'm appalled. And it's like, yes, fine. You can feel that way. But you could at least listen to this guy. Jose Galison knows more than any of these motherfuckers do about theory. Could win an argument with any of them about this shit. And that's what's so weird about the world we live in. It's just so goddamn bizarre. No, Cole doesn't know anything. But no. Jose could hold his own on this shit.
Well, you just destroyed this whole thing. We don't even need to watch the clips now, I think.
But do you get what I'm saying with like the overall kind of take on that? It's like so strange to see.
Look, and I've got clips set up to do that, right? And so we'll do that. But I found the same with Penn, which was he's rooted in his whatever, his consistency, and then just is all over the board. It's rough. It's rough in that. Okay, so I'm gonna start playing these. You ready to go on these?
Let's do it.
Okay, so at any point, if you want me to stop, I'm not going to play like the whole thing through. I'm going to, play little bits and pieces here. This is a kind of an introduction, so we get an idea of who Michael Shermer is.
Tits and ass, right? I mean, there's more to it than that.
For decades, Michael Shermer has been one of the most popular and provocative exploitators of science to popular audiences, having authored best-selling books such as Why People Believe Weird Things, Why Darwin Matters, The Moral Arc, and The Mind of the Market. He founded Skeptic Magazine in 1992, hosts a video podcast with leading activists and intellectuals, and for nearly 20 years authored a widely read column for Scientific American in which he debunked beliefs in UFOs and other paranormal phenomena, explained the rise of the new atheism, and showed how evolution systematically informs human behavior. Shermer's work is deeply and explicitly rooted in libertarian and Enlightenment ideas about individual responsibility, free market economics, rationality, and the search for something approaching objective truth. In 2019,
okay, and that's where I'll just start. That gives us a nice overview. I've been aware of him partly because of the cycling aspect. So that's some of that, and then his libertarian stuff, and we will get into a little more. I don't think there's anything to necessarily talk about out there. And by the way, what was frustrating, you can say some of that, but what was actually somewhat frustrating on it was he had some great aspects, I think, of the interview, like his stuff on woke. And some of the other things where you're like, great, and then suddenly he just derails from that train.
Yeah, no, I did think there were some things he said that I agreed with, but it was it's kind of interesting just to see that. That's kind of what I was talking about. Like, that's who this guy is. That's the role he's supposed to play. Mr. I'm just here with the scientific rational thought on this, and so right. Anyway, that's a good opening.
Okay, so that's kind of who he was, and I'm skipping some of the stuff that we would probably be in agreement of, but I want to get to the other stuff. So this one is, by the way, are you okay with do it a little faster than just normal speed? Yeah,
whatever works for you, brother.
It's like listening to Ben Shapiro on speed there. So this one is about kind of what's driving wokeism stuff. So we'll go from here.
Driving the publication and the broader, I don't know, kind of popular science community towards wokeism, or a lot of attention to identity politics, where that becomes a controlling kind of idea apart from anything that they're actually discussing.
It's definitely new, and it's really just in the last 5 years. I think it coincides with the general trend in culture in general of moving more in that direction. As younger people get those jobs and kind of moving up the demographic scale, they're getting more and more powerful jobs to direct things the way they want. They came of age, when those subjects were really important. Now, there's not much any one of us can do, like about the George Floyd incident or this thing or that thing that we see on the news constantly. But I can do something. I can say, well, look, I'm not a police chief, I'm not a mayor, but I'm an editor, so I can kind of tilt the editorial decisions more toward the kinds of political directions we want to take the country, and I'm doing my little share, and I think it makes people feel like I'm doing something, right? Like, again, what can I do about the George Floyd thing or police violence or whatever? Nothing, but I can go down and march, right? I'm going down there this afternoon, and I'm going to carry my pipe. Makes me feel like I'm doing something, because humans are very moral. We're moralistic. We like to moralize about things and express our outrage.
That kind of protest.
Okay, so my first thought watching that was he makes it kind of sound like this is protesting is brand new. And it made me think, though, of your answer to some of the wokeness of the Occupy Wall Street stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, right. So I think that there's some truth to what he's saying. There's some truth to the idea that, like, this is something that gives people a feeling of being important and being kind of their role in this movie is that they're doing this noble thing. But that is not exactly, that doesn't completely answer, like, why, like, that's not new, right? Like, that's, people have always felt that way. That's not exactly what's new over the last, like, 10 years. And the idea, what I resent, it's not that it's not a piece of the puzzle, but the idea that the entire puzzle is that, these college graduates are coming out with, their crazy kind of goofy idealistic views. And so what are we going to do? Everyone's just got to deal with that. Hey, the 20-year-old intern wants to be woke. So what are we going to do? Well, were we always following the 20-year-old intern? Like,
Right.
what happened? Why did we start doing that all of a sudden over the last 10 years? And that's when you find the more interesting part of this puzzle, which is that, oh, no, it's not just coming from the 20-year-old intern. It's coming from the 20-year-old intern and the CEO. You know, and all of the entire like multi-million-dollar marketing campaign is also being geared toward this. And I'm sorry, but no, that's not just from the fucking 20-year-old intern that came in. And so that's where I think it's like they're focusing on, in the same way that I think when people focus on, you know, how the universities are poisoning people, it's like, it's not that that's wrong. It's just that you're focusing on the least interesting part of this puzzle. Like, don't tell me that the Federal Reserve is coming out right now. You know, that you just see this thing recently where they're like, well, we have more diversity than ever.
Right.
And so as we're about to raise interest rates and pop the biggest bubble in the history of humanity, we just want you to know that we are so much diversity. Is that because some fucking NYU grad just joined the Federal Reserve and everyone just has to, well, this is the next generation? No, it's not. It's not. This is actually the old generation. This is the boomer generation pushing this narrative on everybody. And even those 20-year-olds, this was pushed on by boomers in the university. So I just think there's like, you're missing a huge part of what's really going on here to just say that like, oh, these kids coming up today believe a different thing.
Yeah, I'm not going to add anything to that. This one is kind of where it really starts. So I initially started watching this, and I'm like, yeah, okay, some good stuff. And then he kind of gets to this spot, and this is where I start to, where he's kind of not a libertarian, but we'll go from there.
Started out, you used to call yourself a libertarian, and now you say, I'm not a libertarian anymore. I'm a classical liberal. And just as a kind of framing device, how is that related? What does that mean, and how is that related to your interest in finding out what is right, not being right?
Yeah, well, the language does matter, and the word libertarian has gotten a lot of baggage over the past quarter century or so. I mean, here we are at Freedom Fest. There's quite a wide range of people, and I believe rather different things. But to the general public, it's like, oh, those are those people, that the preppers that want to think the world's going to end, got to get Bitcoin and gold and guns. And, you know, it's like, well, I'm not really one of those, right? And, you know, and also, you know,
when you called yourself a libertarian, what did libertarianism
that was,
mean to you?
I think, more of a kind of an Ayn Rand, you know, just everybody, you just be self-reliance, be self-responsible. I guess the core would be the individual as the fundamental unit of society and their autonomy and liberty to make the choices they want. Right. So this is my concern about conservatives. They say that, you know, we believe in liberty and autonomy and stuff, but they don't. You know, they very much care what consenting adults do in the privacy of their bedrooms, because they think it's going to leak out and cause the moral corruption of the family, and then the community, and then the society, and then the nation. And I think that's the wrong focus, because that's kind of a collectivist argument, right? The nation is over the society.
Well, it is true. I think it was Rick Santorum and Bill O'Reilly at various points talked about how you have gay marriage, and then the next thing you know, men are marrying ducks. And obviously we're all engaged to waterfowl.
Okay, so I could say a bunch of stuff there. One, I think the slippery slope argument is no longer laughable, because you can literally identify as a waterfowl and get married to someone else. So it seems like it's here, Nick. But anyway, there's a few other items there. What do you think about that?
Well, so I'll start on what you were just saying. What's so bizarre is it's like, I don't know, when were the 1990s? 30 years ago, right? And it's like as if you're still making arguments from the 1990s, and nothing has updated in your argument since then. It's like, I remember Jo Jorgensen said I think Jo Jorgensen said this at one point in her campaign, where she said something about the problem with in the inner cities was that black kids had no role models other than like the drug dealers and the gangsters or something like that. And I was like, yeah, I kind of remember like people my dad's age saying this in 1992, but no one, this makes no sense anymore. What do you mean black people have no other role model? What the fuck are you talking about? Like, turn on the television, like turn on anything. Like, there's tons of black role models. Where the fuck are you where have you been? And like this idea that they go, well, the problem with conservatives is they want to regulate what consenting adults are doing in the bedroom. I go, like, okay, give me the example.
Right.
Give me the example today of where conservatives, I have a million problems with conservatives, but give me the example of where conservatives are trying to regulate what consenting adults do in their bedroom. The big conservative battles that I could think of in the culture war are like, you know, what you teach 6-year-olds in public school, or all of this, whether children can transition genders or something like that. But no, there seems to be no big movement of conservatives arguing what consenting adults can do in the privacy of their own bedroom. So I just don't even I don't like when you say that, I go, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. So just tell me. And then like you said, like this idea of oh, and they would argue with this slippery slope about if you legalize gay marriage, then you'd have all this other shit. You're like, dude, I mean, I do not personally buy into the idea that it was a guaranteed thing that if you legalized gay marriage, then all of this would follow. But it did. And so to just go back and say, hey, if you legalize gay marriage, they were saying, well, then what? I mean, then what? Are people even people? Can you just change your gender? Can you just identify as a fucking lizard or whatever you want to? Or what? It's like, well, I don't know. But that did happen. So you have to at least, the idea to throw this out there. And by the way, I would have felt the same way in the 90s. I thought this was a ridiculous right-wing argument. But looking back at it, it's hard to not at least go, okay, this did lead to less than, I don't know what, so 2012 I think is when gay marriage became the law of the land, 2013. Something like that, yeah. And 10 years later the conversation is whether a fucking 6-year-old boy is a boy or a girl. Like that, right. You have to admit there's something there. It's not that necessarily followed from the first one, but to just laugh it off as, oh, these idiots. It's like Nick and Michael have not, they're not even dealing with the current reality. And the other thing that I find kind of interesting, aside from all of this, is that they use this term libertarian, and he used to identify as libertarian, but now he doesn't because it means this crazy prepper gun nut thing. And he goes, well, when I said it, I meant Ayn Rand. And what's interesting for anyone who actually knows about this stuff is that look, Murray Rothbard was the one who really took the term libertarian and made it what we all know it today. It was used in Europe for a bunch of left-wingers. He kind of reappropriated it, said we're going to use it to mean the pure capitalists. Ayn Rand hated the term libertarian, and Murray Rothbard and the whole movement was completely against it. So when he says, no, the term libertarian used to mean Ayn Rand, but now it means this prepper gun nut thing, I just go, have you taken any time to look into this, to know what you're talking about, to what are you even referring to? What's shocking to me is the guy who's supposed to be the rationalist, science-based guy, just using these terms in a way that you go, I don't think you've engaged with any of these people or their arguments or the literature or any of that. It's just very, very bizarre to me to say.
Okay, so I knew you were going on this, so I actually did a little poll the end of the other day, and it was, is Ayn Rand considered a libertarian? No, one on that, but it also led me to a few other disturbing things, which is, I'm going to play you one of these. Let's see here, here we go. So this is, which made me think about Yaron Brook, okay, and Ayn Rand, and we know that he's
I'm only
hated,
hateful to some libertarians. There's some libertarians who I love, who are great, who I support, who I've worked with, who I've been on panels with, who I've done all kinds of things. The ones I hate tend to be the ones who tend to be the rabid anarchists, the people who believe that anarchism is a solution. And as I said, in my debate with an anarchist in Poland, I consider anarchism, and you can include so-called anarcho-capitalism in that, I believe that it's as bad as communism and fascism. I believe that it is the devil. It is really, really, really destructive to human life.
Okay. Oh, the devil. The devil? I thought we were fucking passionate atheists. By the way, I met Yaron last year at a Freedom Fest and hung out with him a bit, and he was totally cool, and we got along well. I don't know if he really knew exactly who I was or what camp I fell into, but all of his arguments against anarcho-capitalism or against Ron Paul or against any of our camp, it always just again, for someone who's supposed to be this like objectivist, rational like guy, it all just like devolves into this like ad hominem nonsense. Like, oh, I consider you to be the devil. I consider you to be communists or something like that. It's like, okay, fine.
I figured out why he was nice to you, and I'm gonna play this clip. I was gonna do it a little later, but I think it works perfectly here now. I think this is the one.
Tom Woods should know better. Now, it's not just that he's an anarchist. It's that he's part of the Mises Institute, which is pro or semi-pro slavery in the South, right? It was anti the Civil War. That has, you can find articles there, underlying racist agendas, not that Tom Woods is, but the organization he's affiliated with is, that are pacifists, which I consider, nutty. They're pacifists. They're anti-American in foreign policy, every sin in the world. They're pro-Hugo Chavez. It's why I hate Ron Paul. Hate Ron Paul, not just dislike Ron Paul. It's because he's pro-Hugo Chavez, pro-Maduro's regime. So I will not deal with people who are over a certain age, let's say 40, who advocate ideas that I consider fundamentally anti-life and who might be confused with objectivism.
So that's probably why he gave you the okay, because you weren't quite 40 at the time.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
And I don't want to say that Shermer is in this camp, but I think there's a lot of overlap, and it has to do with Penn, too. Nothing wrong with if people are atheists at all, but I think you can have an atheist bent that turns you in a weird way towards anything that's not if you have any kind of religion, they'll dismiss it, and then they'll use the evil terms. And I think Shermer does that unwittingly, but I think more so to Penn and obviously Yarnbrook.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't know. In a weird way, it's just kind of disappointing. It's like, I mean, come on, dude. Like, really, that's your argument? Just these blatant straw men. Like, just so blatant. Like, it's like, oh, they were pro-slavery. Like, you can't find anyone at the Mises Institute who's ever said anything even remotely pro-slavery. But the point is that we have this kind of like national religion that says that when the South and North both had slavery and the South seceded and the North then enslaved through military conscription, an army to go invade the South where 700,000 people died, and like there's this huge like atrocity, and that's celebrated as the greatest thing ever. You go, God damn, maybe that's really not the greatest thing ever. And they go, oh, so I guess you're pro-slavery. Or to say Ron Paul supports everyone who's anti-American. Like it's on the level of saying that like if I oppose the war in Iraq, then I support Saddam Hussein. It's just like, I don't know, like, what do you even say to this? It's just so painfully stupid, and like you're not even attempting to grapple with what their arguments are. And it's like, hey, here's the thing, like, Mr. like deep thinker, I can say I'm completely against the war in Iraq because it just made the country way worse. 1 million people or something like that died. I think something like 15 to 18 million people were displaced. And none of that makes me support Saddam Hussein.
No.
It's just like, if you can't even begin to have that, like if you can't at least accept that doesn't make you a Saddam Hussein supporter, then what do you even say to these people? Nobody supported Hugo Chavez. They were just making the point that America has no right to enforce their will around the rest of the world, and that the people who rise up and try to gain independence from America have a legitimate point. They have a legitimate case to do that. And so, I don't know. It's almost like, it's so, like, Yarnbrook, I've seen him when he's good. He makes really great fucking points. Yeah. I liked him when I met him and stuff. I just find this so beneath him that this is his argument.
I agree. And I think, by the way, the way you kind of posed the if you're not for it, then you're obviously against it, or if you're not the way that they want it, reminds me of the 3.5 plank that was removed and how that was kind of used. Well, then you're obviously, Dave, you're the SPLC's #1 because of that. So right. It's crazy. Okay, well, let's keep moving on here. This one, kind of an extension of what he was just talking about the libertarians.
So classical liberal for you, that that kind of fuzzy set or family resemblance.
Right.
And for libertarian, you think over the past 25 years it's become too kind of prepper, too extreme?
It's a little too, a little fringy, but also a little hyper focused on the individual. It's not like we should be free to do absolutely anything.
I just want to pause there because he just said above that he is the Ayn Rand, the individualist.
Yes, the individual is the most important unit in society, right? But it's too hyper-focused on the individual now.
And the conservatives were too collectivists. So
anytime you want. Of course, that's not true. You can't drive on the right side of the road or the left side of the road on any given day, however you feel that day, right? We give up our freedoms all the time. And, if you read the Federalist Papers, that is what they talk about all the time. Well, we want to give people freedom, but, of course, we have to have this and that. And we need a standing army.
So do you think libertarian has become synonymous with anarchism?
Well, that's an old mistake people used to make. And sometimes you have to correct that. No, I think it's more affiliated with Ron Paul, Rand Paul. I don't know, the kind of Second Amendment fundamentalists. The gun nutters.
So
preppers.
we're going to talk about gun nuts. Preppers fit into that, and also Christians, right? Evangelical Christians. Ron Paul and Rand Paul are Baptists.
Well, libertarians are kind of all over the map on religiosity, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you guys have done surveys on this. Some of them are religious, but others are not.
No, and you have on the one hand, you have people like Ayn Rand, and then you have people like Ron Paul. And, certainly over the past 20 years, Ron Paul is probably the single biggest factor when people say, I become libertarian. It's because they've encountered Ron Paul. So he's a huge, tributary into the libertarian movement. And do you think... if you're kind of an evangelical Christian, can you be? Obviously, everybody can call themselves libertarian, but could you be in that family of people who? So what is the? I think kind of what's the litmus test, or what's the Maginot Line there, where you're like, okay, I can't do this.
I would say consistency of principles across different issues.
Here we go.
And I'm more critical of conservatives than libertarians on that for sure. But like when DeSantis sicked the government on Disney. Now, I'm not crazy about Disney's woke progressive politics, and we're going to introduce these characters into our cartoons. Okay, well, but the libertarian way of dealing with that, or what should have been the old conservative way of dealing with that, is, well, I'm just not going to go to and give my money to Disney. I won't go to their films. I won't go to their parks and so on. But DeSantis is like, no, the conservative thing to do is we're going to slap them with, with higher taxes and regulations. It's like, when did that become a conservative thing, right? So I do think libertarians are like, okay, where's the consistency, say, for foreign policy? Don't we have a moral obligation to help people that are under suppression of civil liberties around the world? Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Where's the balance there? I don't know. I guess as a fuzzy set, I would say classical liberalism and libertarianism, they're either in the same or they're two very overlapping.
Dave Smith, what's say?
I mean, it's like, dude, it's just incoherent babble. I don't know what to say. It's like I can't stretch like a one coherent thought out of that. Like, so first, and this is Nick Gillespie's weird thing too. And I like Nick a lot, and I've always anytime I'm at a place where I see Nick Gillespie, and this is to his credit, this matters to me like more than like political philosophy. It's anytime I see Nick Gillespie, it's like, hey, dude, let's grab a beer, and we go over and we laugh and we fucking joke. Like, he's a good dude. I've always had nothing but a good relationship with him.
I met him there, and I just talked about this before. He asked you questions. He asked other people questions, right? And makes you feel like you're engaged. And by the way, men, if you're looking to go date, that's the way you do it. You actually ask them. Yeah, women love to talk.
That is a good point. And as a woman, I love to be asked questions by Nick Gillespie. But he's got his own weird thing that, like, in the same sense that, like, I think what is projected onto a lot of us from the libertarians who don't like us so much is that you guys want to fight this culture war, and you guys want to like insert all of these other issues, and like I have my own cultural views. Yeah. But those people also do, and they're completely blind to the fact that they want to insert that into libertarianism, right? So Nick right away goes like, but isn't Ron Paul and all them, is the problem that they're too evangelical? And you're like, dude, to describe Ron Paul,
leading.
Like when did you ever hear Ron Paul lead with anything that was like about Jesus or how you have to believe in his religion? Ron Paul always like had his religion, like, you knew he was a Christian, you knew he was a Baptist, but it was always kind of like in like his personal thing. He didn't wear it on his sleeve. It was like that was his thing. And so and then Michael, to be like, well, I think when they think of, libertarianism now, they think of Ron Paul or something, and it's like the gun nuts or the preppers. I mean, again, I just don't know. Like, yeah, I know there's that one Ron Paul ad you can find back in the 70s where he's got the gun. I'm sure there are some preppers who liked Ron Paul, but really, what was Ron Paul all about? what was like the big explosion in libertarianism all about? It was all like, if you had to pick an issue, the first one you would pick would not be prepping or fucking gun nuts. It would be like anti-war, anti-Federal Reserve, you know? And somehow that's the shit that the objectivist types always want to fuck, like they have no interest in making that at the front of their issues. And it's not even like they want to take on the issue. They kind of just want to go, oh, well, I guess you love Saddam Hussein and you love, you know, Muammar Gaddafi and you love all these guys. And you're like, what? And then it's like, oh, I guess you hate the Jews if you don't like the Federal Reserve. It's like, this is not actually an argument. This is not actually a response to anything that we're saying. This is just, you're basically woke progressives when it comes to, you know, taking us on these issues. And so that part's very bizarre. And then when he just, like, at the end of it, I'm like, I don't even follow what you're saying. What do you mean? Oh, well, we have to have logical consistency, and if you believe in civil liberties, don't you believe in that for everyone around the world? And do we have some obligation? And blah, blah, blah. Like, look, this is just all so easy. Like, it's like, have you never engaged with the arguments here before? It's like, I don't know, like, do you feel you have an obligation to protect other people's civil rights? Okay, so then go attempt to protect them. But are you going to violate a group of people's civil rights in the name of doing that to go protect other people's civil rights, which, by the way, never protects their civil rights, only makes them worse? Then that's all ridiculous. So obviously that even a good objectivist should be able to see that it's no role for government. And that it's like, if you want to voluntarily go try to, you know, make the world a free place, okay, fine. But that's not the libertarian position. And so I just don't, it's I don't know. I was almost kind of blown away by seeing him like just be such, it's just such mushy nothingness. Like he had no idea of the arguments he was even addressing.
Yeah, so a few quick things on there. One, he was talking about being consistent, and then he talks about, I'm sorry, the foreign policy thing got me because, you know, spreading democracy around the world, we haven't been able to spread it here in COVID times. It's not gonna, you're not gonna get it anywhere else. So those are some, okay. Let's go to the next one. This one, he breaks into kind of talking about COVID, and I thought it was, I don't know how far you got on your own, but we might be pushing past.
I'm not sure if I saw this part. Yeah, let's see.
Okay, this is another stellar one.
Well, we've seen this kind of consistency, my body, my choice, in the two different issues of abortion and vaccines, and each side is like, you know, pretty hypocritical about this.
Do you feel with COVID, is that also a place where, you know, libertarian skepticism towards state power is one thing, and then, you know, but you also want good science and good public policy, and then there was a lot within the libertarian movement, I think. There was a lot of not simply being anti-vaccine mandates, but being anti-vaccine.
See, here I would say the libertarian position would be, I don't like mandates. And like, yeah, okay, that's consistency of principle, government forcing you to do something. But on the other hand, to say, well, but if the vaccines really work and the CDC and Fauci are saying we should all get them, if I go along with that, then the next step is going to be the mandates, and I don't want that, so I'm going to be skeptical of the science.
Right.
No. Yeah. It's okay to just say, look, we should all do this. And by the way, most of us really should get vaccinated. They work.
And there is, within your conception of libertarianism, there is a public, I mean, you're not an anarchist. You believe the state has legitimacy in certain roles, and that there are, and, you know, I would argue maybe COVID is not that case, but that if there is a communicable disease and there is a vaccine that prevents me from giving it to you, whether you ask for it or not, there's a role for the state to say, no, you have to get vaccinated.
In the same way, you have to pay taxes.
You're really in the
I know. We need a standing army. We need a police force, and you know, and so forth to protect our freedoms and our property rights and so on. How are you going to do that? And if you say, well, I'm not participating. I'm not paying taxes.
You didn't sign that social contract, so you'll free ride. So you would say you did not change libertarianism.
I don't know that you need to laugh about the social contract part either. But so anyway, Dave.
Well, he's just like Nick Gillespie is just mocking the libertarian argument, which is that like the social contract is just kind of a made up concept that is not a contract. And like, okay, I mean, again, there's like no real argument here. I mean, I guess at one point he said, well, he completely makes a straw man argument that I've never once heard any. I've never heard, and I live in the anti-COVID regime world. I follow all of the people who are the leading people. I know most of the people who are the leading people in the
And by the way, I know what
world.
you're going to say, and Penn said the same thing, no, but keep going.
But I've never once heard anyone make the argument that, well, I'm against the mandates, and if I say that the vaccines are good and I'm going to take the vaccine, then that'll lead to the mandate. I've just never heard anyone say that. I'm not saying no one has ever said that. I'm just saying that I've never heard anyone, and I'm pretty up on this anti-COVID regime stuff. So I don't know who you're, like, what straw man you're knocking down there, but that's not any of our, none of us are making that argument. No. And to say, if there was a vaccine, that there was a communicable disease that the vaccine could stop the spread of, would there be a role for the government to play inside? I'd still disagree with that, but that's not the situation that we're actually in. And so what he just asserts that, well, the vaccine works and it is good and we should take it. And so, okay, whatever, you know, you could be against the mandates, but you still should take it. Like, okay, but what exactly do you mean by that? Like, define it works. Do you mean it works the way it was sold? Do you mean it works because the way that Joe Biden and Fauci and all of them sold it was saying that if you get this vaccine, you won't get COVID, you won't get sick, and you can't transmit it to someone else? Well, no one's arguing that it works in that way anymore. Do you mean when then after that fell apart, when they said, well, you won't get very sick and you won't die if you get the vaccine? No one's defending that anymore because so many people have gotten very sick and died even after being vaccinated. So now when you say works, you're reduced to saying, I think you have less of a chance of dying or getting very sick if you have the vaccine. Of course, not if you got the vaccine like a year ago, but if you got the vaccine a year ago and then got boosted within 3 months of when you got the latest variant, then we think there's a chance that you have less of a chance of getting severely sick. I mean, at a certain point, it's like, look, we all know that, like, at this point, it's been conclusively shown that natural immunity works better than the vaccine. And at this point, you have to have the latest booster within 3 months before. Outside of that, there's no scientific evidence that actually demonstrates that it does anything at all. And forget the 85%, effective rate. It's like 3% effective rate if you didn't have it within the last 3 months. That is the latest data. So again, you're just not dealing with the real world, like, of what we're actually talking about. And then, of course, you could say, well, there's the mandate. We could be against the mandates. Well, yeah, that's true. But there's also the fact that the vaccine was funded through taxpayer money and is shielded from liability. Why does it need to be shielded from liability? If it's such a kooky conspiracy theory that there are any type of negative health outcomes associated with the vaccine, then why the fuck does it need? Why can't they be liable for the vaccine that people are being forced to take, as you acknowledge, through these mandates? And look, all this other stuff, and then there's just no argument there, and to say, it's like they do this thing that's it's such sophistry where they go, like, if there's a bad thing, they go, well, there's a bad thing, but there's another bad thing. It goes, well, there's a bad thing, but we also have to pay taxes, and we also have to do this. And it's like, okay, I'm just saying, it's hard to even counter this because you're not even responding to the argument. You're not even, like, making an argument or responding to an argument. You're just saying, well, taxes exist. So it's like if you killed someone and then they went, oh, okay, well, you're against killing someone, but war exists. So,
gotcha.
Okay, is there a point to this? Okay, yes, taxes exist, and you assert that that's good. You assert that we need a standing army. You assert that we need a police force. Okay, but you didn't make an argument for it. You said we need a police force to protect our property rights. But of course, like, as Rothbard and so many brilliant fucking ANCAPs have broken down, the idea of saying, like, we need what? So we need to pay taxes to protect our property rights. So we need to institutionalize a group of people who can violate our property rights to protect our property rights. To me, that sounds like some Stockholm Syndrome bullshit. Like, the idea that, like, you would say, like, well, I need to let someone rape me once a month to make sure I don't get raped. Like, you need someone.
You're kind of making a joke, but wait till you hear one of his analysis later.
Okay, Jesus Christ, let's do it. It's getting closer. It's going. If 0 was over here from 0 to pen, it's getting closer to pen. All right.
By the way, I did think that was funny, but I didn't actually expect you to reply. So I was more like, oh shit, I don't know how to do, Dave, on your jokes.
There you go. Well, okay. I'm gonna keep saying it until you acknowledge it was funny.
Okay, it was totally
a scale
fine.
of 0 to pen. That's my
I should have come up with like something in between there, a different name, but I'm not as quick. I'm going to play you a clip because I think here's the problem is he goes deep. He's a scientific guy. So he goes deep on a subject and he understands it. And then a subject he doesn't, he somehow defaults back to this mainstream media understanding, which I think Penn Jillette was doing a lot here too. This was an interview he had done a few years ago with Lance Armstrong. And I think it's, so appeal to authority. And I think it kind of plays into what they're talking about.
There's a cost risk to protecting your family with a gun. And because we know from studies that if you have a gun in the house, you're 11 times more likely to have a suicide, an accidental shooting. So your kids get the guns, your kids' friends find the gun, depressed relative is over for the weekend and kills themselves versus you killing the bad guy. You a good guy with a gun killing the bad guy with a gun.
Okay, look, you're the only smart guy sitting at this table. On issues like that, you give me a number like 11 times, I'm like, okay, then I get it. Like
right.
if 100 guys are sitting in a room, the 100 smartest scientists in the world sit in a room and say global warming is real, I go, okay. Yeah. If they all say it's real, then it's real.
Yeah.
Like that's the way I roll. And
but see, I think that's exactly what Aaron Rodgers, as an example, didn't do, and that's exactly what you would expect Shermer not to do. That appeal to authority of just like, and I understand. I mean, so what's your take on that kind of concept? Because we all, in a sense, do it. We outsource knowledge to someone else, but at some point, we can't just take everything in.
Well, so I think that, yes, that is true. And generally speaking, on the larger scale that you get amongst free people, like in a free market or something like that, this is a smart path for human behavior. Like if I have a problem in my hot water system, I call an expert and I just defer to what he says. And if I if I need a roofer, I just call a roofer and I go, okay, what you say is correct here. The thing about that is though, right? If I'm gonna say, hey, look, my fucking roof is leaking, and I call a roofer and he goes, well, look, you can't just replace this one fucking part of your roof. You need a whole new roof because the water's coming in from here and going over to here and coming down here. And so you need this whole fucking thing. And I call a company that's like, this is a known company with a good reputation and they're big and they're not just ripping me off. That would be more of a risk to them than it would be to fucking just be good and not, get found out for doing that or whatever. Fine. I defer to the experts. But what I don't do is get on a fucking podcast and start talking about roofing like I know anything about it. Okay? That's the difference. And so what you don't do is then pretend like you actually have any expertise on this area, or you've even thought it through, or even read the relevant literature and really given this any thought. And anyone who's repeating this bullshit about how you're 11 times more likely to fucking shoot yourself if you have a gun in the house, this is stupid. It's so fucking stupid because it doesn't account for any of the real human interactions. And yes, if you want to say that the majority of the accidents are incredibly rare, but the suicides in America yes, there's a lot of suicides by guns, but that's if you just want to say, okay, whatever it is, 20,000 a year people kill themselves with guns in America, and you go, well, I guess then if we got rid of the guns, there'd be less suicides. It's no, actually, in other countries where they have way less guns, many of them have higher suicide rates because it turns out that that's not actually the issue. The issue isn't that there's guns there. By the way, I do think it's kind of intuitive to think, oh, yeah, I guess if people want to commit suicide and they have a gun, they'd be more likely to do it and do it effectively and actually kill themselves. Yeah. But it's not true once you dive into the data. It's actually not true. It has suicide is a very deep spiritual fucking problem that has to do with alienation and all types of other things. And no, in a lot of societies, in Holland and Japan and all these places where they have way lower rates of gun ownership, they have way higher suicide rates. So again, it's just this is surface level bullshit. And then to have was that Lance Armstrong?
Yeah,
in the
sorry.
clip, to have him say that he's like, well, I mean, if a bunch of experts tell me global warming is real, then global warming is real. It's like, okay, that's great that you view it that way. Why the fuck are you talking into a microphone right now? Like, why are you even talking about this? Like,
by the way, go ahead. It's all right.
Because what does that mean? What does that mean? Oh, if they tell me global warming is real, okay, it's real. Or climate change is real. Like, okay, so what? The climate is changing? Okay, it's real. What's causing it? How bad is it? What's the solution for it? What's the cost versus benefits of the solution that you're proposing? There's all types of other questions that you would then follow from that. And so it's just like, again, I have nothing against people outsourcing shit, but then don't fucking talk about it. Like, don't talk about it unless you have something to add to the conversation. You've at least attempted to grapple with what the arguments on all sides are.
I've heard you guys on Legion of Skanks so talking about electric lawnmowers. So, I mean.
Yes, well, that is true. And I don't know anything about that. But we were just trying to be funny.
So was Lance Armstrong, unfortunately.
That is true. You might be right about that. Fair enough.
By the way, the beginning of that interview, the book is something about utopia or dystopia. And Lance is like, I've heard the word utopia. I've never heard the word dystopia. And I'm like, well, there we go.
All right. Well, there you go.
This is about... I think it plays into his consistency.
And so again, that consistency, if you really
Why
cared.
is consistency so important to you? And I mean, this is true of libertarians, right? Post even, lapsed libertarians or whatever, like, and when I talk to most people, like, I'm always like, oh, I got, is this logical? Does it make sense? Does it work all the way through? Most people are like, I don't give a shit. Like, this is what I believe here. This is what I believe here. And they don't have to be consistent.
Yeah. Well, because if you have a principle that's based on some factual basis, that it should be applied consistently as possible, with the recognition there may be a few exceptions here and there, but that's the whole point of having a principle, is that you apply it evenly across the board, right? And so again, I just think people are inconsistent about that for obvious reasons. I just want what's good for me and my tribe. And it's like the issue over the private prayer that the high school football coach gave, 50-yard line.
Private prayer on the 50-yard line.
With the players around him, and he's a Christian. Okay, and of course Christians going, yes, this is great. The Supreme Court voted in his favor. Yeah, well, what if he was down there saying Allahu Akbar? Oh, no, we're not going to allow that. Oh, okay. Well, so what's the...
So, Dave, what's interesting is you talked about, it looks like he's moved from the 90s to early 2000s now. He's moving his way up.
Well, yeah, and it's like, I mean, okay, so I guess I would kind of grant the first thing you said about consistency.
Yeah.
Which is like, well, yeah, if you have a principle, then you don't want to contradict it. And if you contradict something, then it's not correct by definition, right? Like if I contradict what I'm saying, then okay, what I'm saying is not correct. Follows logically to me, right? Like if I say I do not exist, then that's not correct because I contradicted myself. I acknowledged who I am and then said I don't exist. So then that can't be right. So that's why we care about being consistent, because we care about being correct. We care about the truth. So I agree with that. But much like when he said before, the dumbass thing, which again is just like, which I forgot to even comment on, but it's like it's like the dumbest, most unthoughtful. Some people say my body, my choice, and they mean that for the vaccine, but they don't mean that for abortion.
Right.
It's like, well, yeah, that's if you don't take on the pro-life argument at all, then I suppose you could view it that way. But the fact that it's my body, that's just the pro-choice position. That's not the pro-life position. The pro-life position is arguing that it's not just your body, that there's also like an innocent life within your body, and that's the concern there. So like, if you just pretend that argument doesn't exist, okay, then we're just, we're the argument for being pro-life is that we don't believe it's your body. Okay, but you haven't taken on the argument at all, which is like the argument is that the baby inside of your body is an innocent life and you don't have a right to kill it. So even with this, now he's going to say okay, well, you're okay with a Christian prayer, but you wouldn't be okay with a Muslim prayer. So that's inconsistent. But look, however you feel about any of this, just factually speaking, no, that's not true. That's not inconsistent. If your perspective is from that of a Christian. If your perspective, if you're a Christian and you believe that Christianity is the correct religion, then you're for the correct religion having a prayer in the 50-yard line, and you're not for the incorrect religion having a prayer there. In the same way that if you're a Muslim, you'd be fine with a Muslim prayer, but not fine with a Jewish prayer. Like, now you can argue why you would go, well, look, you believe this, but other people believe that, and whatever. You know what I mean? Like, make the point about like why you think it's like, well, look, we live in this multi-plural society where there's different people who have different views, and we can't have one enforce their view on the rest of you. Fine, but it's actually not inconsistent from the religious person's point of view. If you're a religious Christian and your view is that, you know, Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, and that is the truth, then you're for the truth being told on the 50-yard line and not for what is not the truth being told on the 50-yard line. There's not an inconsistency there. So it's this inability to, again, which is kind of the through line here, is this inability to actually grapple with what the arguments are that the other side is making. And that's what's kind of, you know, just disappointing and makes this kind of like dumb. I don't know how else to say it. It's just dumb.
And I don't know whose perspective he was talking about the 50-yard line as an example. Now, I will say, and I skipped it here because there's so much we still need to get through, which is he does talk about abortion. He says he's pro-life, pro-choice, but he's really gone through an understanding of this, or an in-depth investigation. He reached out to a bunch of pro-life people, and he said it's on a spectrum. So he's okay with it. And he's like, yeah, you don't, and Nick's like, well, he does make drastic comments that are insane, which is he's really worried about the Dobbs decision because he knows pro-life people and they're all religious and they're now going to be chasing everyone down. And I'm like, well, that hasn't been happening in the first place. So I don't think that's going to be the case. But he does at least have a little bit of a different, we don't need to get into all that, but that's kind of where he's at on that. Okay, so this one is, we'll just keep cruising here. And you're doing great, Dave. Haven't missed a mark yet, in case you were concerned.
Science, I mean, people, and maybe it's libertarians or scientists, want to believe that I'm arguing from science and reality into my politics, but perhaps these are separate spheres.
Not necessarily. I'm willing to leap over Hume's wall, separating is and ought. We do it all the time. I mean, the way things are, we have to structure society in a way based on human nature. And again, just fairness should be our goal.
Why fairness?
Well, again, kind of a Rawlsian argument that you don't know where you're going to be. So we have to make it as fair as possible, and then you do whatever you want. And we're not going to have equal outcomes. This is the problem today, is that the drive toward equal outcomes. No. We're never going to get equal outcomes, just for 1,000 different reasons. So just equal opportunities is the goal. Anyway, so...
So I've heard you talk about that before, where you don't believe necessarily in the equal opportunities even. What's your understanding of that, or your take on that?
Well, it's stupid. It's just really stupid. I mean, if you're going to take this Rawlsian point of view, for people who don't know, the Rawlsian argument is that, like, basically you should want to structure society as if you were almost I forget the term that he used, the veiled whatever, but so you're outside of society and you have no idea where you're going to be placed in. What would you want out of a society? You would want there to be at least a guarantee that no matter where you're placed, you know, it won't be too bad, or there'll be kind of like a limit, and, you know, things will be somewhat equal and fair, whatever the fuck fair means. You know, it's like, okay, well, first off, that's just like a ridiculous abstraction that has nothing to do with reality. And second of all, if that's the case, then there's an argument for equal outcomes.
Yeah.
You know, make it an equal outcome then, maybe. I don't know. I don't actually know that that's true. Like, the Rawlsian thing seems to just be an assertion based on a hypothetical that people wouldn't want to gamble if they were in this situation that no human being's ever been in. That isn't a real thing. I don't know. Is that true? I see people gamble all the time. Maybe they would want to gamble for the shot to be a billionaire. Maybe they'd take a 1 in 100 shot to be a 1 in a 10,000 shot. Like, I don't know. Maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they would. Maybe they wouldn't. Who the fuck really cares? But then that would seem like an argument for equal outcomes. He seems to kind of concede that, you know, we recognize practically that trying to force equal outcomes would be a disaster. So we can't force equal outcomes. We can just force equality of opportunity. So already, I think the whole thought process is completely flawed. But if you're going to acknowledge that equality of outcome is a problem, Well, why is equality of opportunity a problem? For the exact same reasons. For the exact same reasons that equality of outcome is a problem, equality of opportunity is a problem. Like, what do you even mean? What do you mean by opportunity? Like, the thing is that fairness is this very weird term. Like, what does that mean exactly? Is it fair that, like, this, it's a very childish way of looking at things. Like, yes, for my 1-year-old and 4-year-old, it seems to be fair that I give them each an equal piece of, something. You get one toy, you get one toy. That does seem to be fair. But when we're talking about, say, grown-ups, if one person works 5 times harder than the other person, is it fair that they each get one piece at the end? That doesn't seem fair to me. It seems fair that the person who did more and worked harder deserves to get more. And is it fair that you shouldn't get what you were worth in the marketplace and someone else should get, you should get less and they should get more than they were worth? That doesn't seem fair. Seems kind of arbitrary. What exactly is fair? But then again, is it fair that LeBron James can do a 360 dunk and I can't? That also doesn't seem fair. But what are we going to do? Use force to equalize that? You know what I mean? So what? Because that doesn't seem fair either. But the idea of equality of opportunity, once you accept that the outcomes are going to be different, well, then what does that mean? If the outcomes are going to be different, and so one person can be way more successful than the other person, well, what happens one generation later? What's your biggest motivation in life, Tyler?
Well, personally, without making jokes, it's my family, my kids.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Your family and your kids. Same with me. To give them a better opportunity in life. Yeah. So if your biggest motivation is that your outcome is good so that you can give your kids a better life, well, then they have a better opportunity, right?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. The outcome is the opportunity for the next generation of fucking kids. And how could you even possibly have equality? The word equality means the same, right? How could all kids have the same opportunity? Some kids don't have 2 parents. Some kids don't have parents who loved them and supported them. Some kids don't have parents who had money or however you feel about that, it sucks that some kids don't have that. But if we're going to equalize that, then that's the same as outcome. Outcome and opportunity are all the same fucking thing. Equality is not the goal. Egalitarianism is a revolt against nature. And any libertarian who is or supposed libertarian or even classical liberal who's talking about this, what the fuck do you actually mean? There is no equality of opportunity. We all have different opportunities inherently. There's no way to control for that, whether it's just our intelligence or our luck or our parents or our connections or whatever. It's as utopian, and not just utopian, but dystopian as equality of outcome. What's that? What is that?
What's that? And you have kids, and those kids are going to start getting older. One of the movies, the kids' movies, is Incredible and Incredibles. And one of the guys in there, he says he wants to make everyone superheroes because when everyone's a superhero, nobody is, and that's kind of that concept. Right. I want to play you another clip here from the interview he did with Lance, because it talks. I just found some. These are crazy things you find here. Here we go.
I mean, this whole idea of a fair society and how did some people become successful? Now, the conservative model is that what's called the just world theory, that the poor are poor because they just don't work hard enough. They're just not motivated, and that's too bad for them. And I'm successful because I work hard. Yeah, well, this is what Obama meant when he gave that speech. He famously said, you didn't build that company or you didn't earn that. And he got picked on by the conservatives. But what he meant is, somewhere along the line, you met a teacher just by chance. You went to this school instead of that school, and this person motivated you. You didn't choose that. Your parents gave you some drive genetically or whatever that you're motivated to work hard and make money. Not everybody cares about that, and it's not important. You don't have to make money to be happy, and so on. So, and then there's all the chance and the other things, the roads, the bridges, and so on. You didn't do any of that. That's what he meant, and I thought it was unfair that he got picked on. Because not everybody has the same drive. So if we're going to level the playing field, what about some people are more motivated to train harder than others? Well, that's just the way it is.
I honestly can't understand if he's okay with it or not okay with it. So there you go. But it's just another concept of his fairness idea.
Right. It's just, again, it's incoherent. It's like, so what are you saying? So what's your conclusion from all of that? The problem with what Obama was saying was his conclusion from that is that the government should be allowed to forcibly take money from those people who have more. No one was ever arguing. Again, this is all just like the straw man of like libertarianism and I suppose conservatism to some degree too. And no one was arguing that everything I have, I did 100% myself and no one else ever contributed to it. You know, like whoever made that argument? If someone did, find me the person who made that, and fine, I'll, you know, the argument he just said, is that not a blatant straw man? You know, of course, the conservative just world theory is that the poor deserve to be poor, the rich deserve to be rich. No one ever got there from corruption or from an advantage or anything. Has anyone ever said that? Anyone? I've never heard anyone say that. And if they have, okay, one stupid person said something once, and you're knocking that down
somewhere.
Like, I don't know, dude. Like, someone, like, you know, helped develop the English language, and someone, you know, like, made this shirt I'm wearing and this computer I'm talking into and this microphone. Like, yeah, obviously we all realize that, like, a lot of people came together to and were somewhat, no matter how much, you know, it's a mixture. Like, yes, you're the product of decisions you've made. We all could have made decisions that would have like put us in a worse situation than we are. We all could have made decisions that might have put us in a better situation than we are. But also we're kind of fortunate that we just happen to be born where we're born and where we are, and all these other factors are involved. What are we talking about here? The question is, does this fucking criminal coercive organization based out of Washington, D.C. have a right to steal at the threat of violence more of your money to spend it on bombing innocent people and then running this Ponzi scheme known as the entitlements? That's really the question. And so, like, what are you even talking about? All this shit is just abstraction, bullshit, straw man nonsense. It's goobly goo nothing. It's like the fucking inside of a fucking Krispy Kreme donut. Just garbage and calories and nothing of value. But pontificating as if he's talking about something interesting. Like, is it fair? Is it equal? Is this fair? Is that? Yeah, it is and it isn't. I don't know, dude. Like, it is. It's unfair that LeBron James can jump fucking 25 feet in the air and has all these gifts from God, and then somebody else born in his exact same situation just had none of those athletic abilities and just had to fucking stay right where he was. But at the same time, he also worked his ass off, you know, to get where he is. And at the same time, he also did all this stuff. So it's like, yes, it's obviously all a mix of all of these things. The question becomes, the fact that LeBron was born with these God-given gifts and then worked his ass off, do you have a right to use force to go fucking take what he has to give it to someone else? That's the fucking question. And there's a question there. I'll grant you that you could make an argument about that. But that's the question. And until you're addressing that, you're not having even a real interesting conversation at all.
I agree. Okay, let's continue on here. You doing okay? Still hanging in there?
Let's fucking do it, man.
All right.
And this is probably one of the issues where you depart most from a kind of libertarian orthodoxy. But you believe in gun control, and can you make the brief case for that? And you know, why do libertarian, or maybe not libertarians, let's say Second Amendment fundamentalists, in your phrase, where are they wrong?
Well, so, society is filled with collective action problems we need to solve as a group. And to do that, you have to get, a majority, and then they all have to chip in, like paying taxes. Again, It's just, most libertarians are not anarchists, and they agree, okay, we need property rights, and therefore we have to have a court system to support your property rights, and we need a police force and a prison system and a military. All of a sudden, you have a big government that you've got to fund with taxes. All right, how is this any different? Why is guns separate? In my opinion, it's because guns are almost totemic as a proxy for something else, this kind of focus on individual autonomy, freedom, self-defense, liberty, freedom from the government, that sort of thing, over and above all the other concessions you've already made. I'm going to pay for police and fire and military and so on. And if I don't pay my taxes, they're coming to get me at some point. I'll get the letters and then and so forth. But eventually, men with guns will come to your house, right? Why you sign on for that, So
but I think that's why they want the guns, because then they can fight back.
I know, but right? But why would? Okay, so right. So, but why would you support that? Because you've already agreed that we need somebody to protect my property rights through a court system that I'm willing to pay for. Well, how about the guy over there? He doesn't want to pay for it. well, then send men with guns over there, and he has guns. You know, this leads, in a way, this kind of fanaticism about just arm everybody. You know, is a way of saying the United States is a failed state. And it's just everybody's on their own, and we don't really trust the police or the military to do their job. We don't trust our institutions. We give up. It's like we're living in Somalia. Well, no, we're not living in Somalia. I can see if you live there, why you'd want a gun or something. And I do get that, you know, if I'm an African American living in an inner city and I don't trust the police because they're not trustworthy and they can't get there in time, and there's violence around me, I should have a gun. So I'm, again, not binary. You know, I'm not anti-gun at all. I grew up with guns. My stepfather was a hunter, so I had a BB gun and a pellet gun, and then a 20 gauge shotgun, and then a 12 gauge shotgun, and for 20 years I had a handgun in my house in Altadena, and you know, but it's just we're facing a social problem. How do we solve it? The carnage is, you know, more people die by guns than by cars.
And is that, I mean, one of
Okay, so I thought this is a longer segment, but we need to really break this down. So
that's by the way, I'll say the most interesting part of this whole thing was what he said there, because I actually do think he makes a really fantastic case against minarchy without, you know, realizing it at all. But I think he does. And I think he's actually right when he kind of says, he was like, well, if you concede that, like, this is the flaw in the minarchist argument, right? He goes, if you concede that we need roads, and we need courts, and we need police, and we need a military, and we need a prison system, and that if you violate that, we'll send men with guns to go fuck your shit up because you didn't want to, like, comply with that, well, then why can't we also do this? That is ultimately, this is what made Murray Rothbard an anarchist, was that he was a minarchist, and then people, like, really pushed him to this point. Well, if we could do that, then why not also a hospital? And why not also a school? And why not also this? And before you know it, you get to, like, why not communism? Why not, like, everything? If you're conceding this point, then why not round up the guns? So I actually think there's some truth to, like, what the logic he starts on, but he never actually makes the case for why that is correct. Why we should, like, base society in that way.
Dave,
so,
I think he actually said at one point, I don't think you should have a gun, because then how does the IRS come to your house to enforce against you if you have the gun? And that's where Nick's like, well, that's why you have the gun.
Right. But it's so funny to just be like, oh, look, that's fine that, like, you're taking this logic. I get it. You're almost like taking the minarchist logic and then saying, well, why not communism? But just don't call yourself anything close to a libertarian. Like, okay, fine. But, like, right, yeah, like, but you're not anything close to that if that's the next level you go to. And to say, I don't know what. Well, if you live in Somalia, I could see you wanting to have a gun. Well, okay.
Well, I think he said funny that the cities are failed states.
Right. So it's funny that Nick goes, so make the argument for why we shouldn't have guns. And his argument is basically like, well, I mean, you know, we have all these other things that we do, so why not this? And then, I don't know, it's a social problem. We need a collective solution and blah, blah, blah. Like, there's just, it's unbelievable. Again, this is like kind of my through line throughout this whole thing. It's unbelievable for the guy who's like, hey, I'm Mr. Science, rational, logical thought. And you go, there's no coherent argument in any of this. There's like nothing. Like, what the fuck is even your point? I've heard arguments against all the things I believe in that are at least like coherent arguments that I disagree with. Right. But he's not even laying any of them out. It's just like, well, I don't know. You know, you have collective action and you have this. We have a problem. Maybe we have a solution. Maybe there's a collective solution. Like, what? What's the problem? What solution are you advocating? What's the logical argument for why this is the solution? Oh, nothing? Oh, basically, yeah. So, like, what? You don't want people to have guns to fight back for when the government comes to enforce the rules that they didn't sign on to? Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's crazy town. Okay, so I'm going to continue on with this one because it gets better, Dave, if you can do that.
The things that is true. I mean, gun homicides have been going down, you know, since the mid '90s. So there's slight upticks and things like that. But the suicides, you know, I mean, that's like more than half of gun deaths, right? So that's part of what your argument is, right?
Right. Yeah. Right. So how about just regulation in the form of better background checks, right? And we already have laws about you know, men with restraining orders against their significant other. I mean, when a woman is murdered, I think it's like 90% of it is by a significant other after they broke up or got divorced or child custody issue, something like that. You know, why have the gun there if he already has a restraining order? He can't buy a gun. You know, a lot of those laws are already in place. Just enforce them. You know, the gun show loophole.
Are you sympathetic to the argument that, yeah, I mean, this is the point. We have tons of gun laws and they don't seem to be, you know, they're in the same way that we, you know, you can't be utopian about certain things. Like school shootings are horrible, but they are
rare,
not the.
Yeah.
They're not common enough where that's where you make all the laws.
To be
based
honest,
on
Matt,
that.
I'm ready to give up on the whole thing and just say, I mean, it's just let everybody have their guns, because there's already 400 million guns, right? 120 guns for every 100 people.
Yeah.
So we're talking about 400 million guns in America. We're not going to get them back.
Yeah.
You know, if the government said we're doing a buyback or a take back program, it'd be like Waco every day.
Yeah.
Ruby Ridge. Every day.
It's fascinating too that actually, as more guns are in circulation, it's in a fewer percentage of households, which. So it's
Right, so
fewer
clustering,
people are
right.
owning more guns, and
Yeah.
I'm not particularly focused on the gun issue, but that seems like an interesting social change,
Right.
and I'm not sure what accounts for it or if that's good or bad or
Yeah,
indifferent. but-
Yeah, you know, and the examples that I use, everybody uses, you know, Austria and Australia, other countries have done these things and it worked. Yeah, but they're smaller, homogeneous population. They didn't have very many guns in the first place. They don't have the same culture that we have about guns, Second Amendment, all that. I don't know. I don't know what the solution is. It seems like somebody should do something, and I know how libertarians respond to that. Yeah, the government. We don't want the government to do more. It's already doing too much. Okay, but again, like back to the analogy with cars, pretty much everybody signed off on the idea, well, cars should be regulated. You know, seatbelts are good and airbags are good. And, you know, even though the number of car deaths still hovers like 35 to 40,000 a year, but if you adjust it by the miles driven, cars are much safer now than they used to be. And why is that? Government regulation. You have to have seatbelts.
You're speaking heresy now.
I know.
I know. That government
I
can
don't
never
think
do
that-
anything good.
I don't see how that would have happened just by private enterprise.
Yeah,
right?
that's a.
Okay. Are you spellbound there?
I don't know what the fuck he's saying. Like, it's just like, if you
We're
just
getting
go like,
closer to
I
pen.
have nothing to say about guns. Like, I don't know, like, what was any of that? He's just like, first off, like, well, we got to do something, but yeah, I guess at this point I'm ready to throw my hands up and go, yeah, we'd have a Waco and a Ruby Ridge every day. It's like, okay, well then I guess if you care about gun violence, we shouldn't have any of this gun control, right? What I don't know. Like, this proved my point completely about what I was saying, where it's like, it's just this mushy nothingness. All right. How do I even respond to this argument? Like, yes, okay, yeah, you were right with the Ruby Ridge Waco part, so let's not do anything about it. Okay. Yes. Like, there are suicides, and there are as he said before, you know, it goes well, there's like, why not just take the gun away from the abusive husband and have background checks? And Nick's like, we have all of that. And it's like, okay, right. So there you go.
And they're, by the way, I do those kind of things all the time with my job, and they're horrible. They're basically, you're stripping someone of the due process rights and just taking these things away. So it's a bad situation already, and I don't know that his solution is really what. Now look, he talks some more stuff. He does some cycling stuff. I'm not going to put you into that. But what do you think about what he keeps calling about his collective action problems? I know he didn't like. I mean, conservatives sound like to me they're just solving the problem of your bedroom as a collective action problem. He's just not okay with that.
It's just like he never makes clear what he means by it. And for someone who's talking about like, even if he goes, I was a libertarian and I'm not a libertarian anymore, you'd think like, okay, but you're going to get down to like what the point is here. Like, what do you mean by collective action? What do you mean by collective problems? I mean, none of us are arguing that there aren't problems that take a group of us to solve. But, like, what do you mean by that? And what's the best solution? This is what I say. It's just vague nothingness to just say we're like, you're just going like, well, there's problems that affect a lot of us, and it's going to take a lot of us to solve them. Therefore, some policy. Like, what? I don't know. Okay. But you have, like, he's not putting forth an argument, so I don't even know how to counter his argument. Okay, yes, I agree. There are collective problems that take collective solutions. Sure.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, we'll move on to the next one because we're almost done here. Oops, I lost you there. And I'm learning. There we go. I don't have an intern, so okay, here we go.
Like, does rationality, and again, understanding that it's imperfect, we all have, you know, our cognitive bias and all of that kind of stuff. Is there, more broadly speaking, are we more rational than we were 50 years ago, or is that never the way to really think about
this?
things?
This is a big debate in cognitive psych circles of, to what extent are we naturally gullible and we fall for things like cults and scams, things like that, because people do fall for those things. But the counter argument to that is, in fact, most people don't fall for cults and scams. The reason these scammers have to send out a million emails to get one sucker is because most people are not suckers, right? And most people who join religious sects and groups and self-help groups and they go to Tony Robbins weekend, they're not joining cults. And if the thing turned into a cult, they probably would leave, right? So we only hear, there's an availability here, so we only hear about the ones, the Jonestown and Waco and sort of the crazy ones, the Heaven's Gate, but those are really rare, right? And so I've been thinking about this, to what extent this is called default to truth. When you tell me something, I just tend to believe you because I know you. I don't have time to fact check everything you tell me. So there's kind of a social trust that most of the time works, right? And I was just
okay. So I played that one mostly to set up the next one, unless you have something specific you want to say about that.
Well, I would respond to that by just being like, how exactly do you define a cult?
Well, he said it's extreme. I mean, he didn't define it, but you can tell by his answer that they're very few and far between. Most people don't. Yeah.
I remember having this one of the few classes I took in college that I really fucking loved. And this professor said at one point, he goes, "What's the difference between a cult and a religion?" And just let that go around the room for a while. And everyone, and basically the only difference anyone could come up with was that one's smaller than the other, and by the way, I'm not saying that there isn't a religion that is correct. I'm just saying that what by definition, forget if anyone listening to this, take your religion out of it, right? Your religion is the one true religion, but take that one out of it. But what's the difference between some other false religion and a cult? Now, you could say if there's a cult that devolves to you all have to kill yourselves or something like that, or okay, fine, that's a little different. But not that some religions haven't devolved to that also. But what's the difference? So, yeah, you could say how many people fall for some scheme that they have to email you about. Yeah, fine. How many people voted for Joe Biden? How many people voted for Donald Trump? What's the number between the two of them? I think it's 150 million, something like that. Seems like a lot of people falling for a cult to me. So there's just nothing scientific about the way he's measuring this. Define what you mean, and then let's actually look into the real world. And the fact that this is the problem with these fucking real staunch atheist types is that they go well, if there's less people going into religious, institutions, then that means they're not in a cult. Well, that's not true. I mean, look at college campuses. Look at the rise of wokeism. Are you telling me they haven't all fallen into a cult? I see mass cults everywhere around me in this world. Maybe I'm involved in one too, but I see them all around me. And I don't think that yes, it's true that most people will not fall into the absolute dumbest version of the fucking cult. Most of them aren't sending $30,000 to a princess in Africa to fucking bring her over to America. Okay, fine, but that doesn't really prove my point. Well, I'll put you in touch with someone for that.
I don't want princess. I mean, there are definitions of a cult, obviously, and he does know those. I mean, if you look at the congressional testimony of Waco as an example, they had experts come out there and delineate what is a cult, and they determined that this was a religion, not a cult, whatever. But you're right, it would be good, and he probably knows that at some time. But Dave, you don't ruin my thing here, because we're going to talk to him about what his favorite cult is.
Reasonably well.
What's your favorite cult?
Well, I guess. This is going to sound crazy. The cult of Trump at the moment. I mean, I really think it is something like that. Just yesterday, just after the latest January 6th hearings, where it's obvious to anyone with eyes and ears that he knew he lost and he was just a naked grab for power. And you still see some of these Republican toadies.
Tons of Republicans, people running for office saying that the election was stolen.
Right now, it could be they're just opportunists saying, I got to say whatever I think the boss wants me to say so that he gives me his endorsement so I can win the election. I don't really believe it. That's possible. But what concerns me is that, 60% of self-identified Republicans say they have nothing to gain. They just, I think rigged. Right. Yeah. It was rigged. That's a kind of conspiracy theory and maybe even a cult that's not on the fringe. What's the status of skepticism? More important than ever. Because, most of these conspiracy theories theories that I've used to deal with, the JFK or 9/11, they're pretty fringy, right? And this one is, right there at the top of the government. And but I'm worried this could threaten our democracy. Right? If enough people believe this, they won't accept the outcome of the next election.
We got one more clip after this, so you're good.
Well, all I'll say about this is it's just like, okay, let's say I accept that, what he's saying, which I don't exactly, and part of the reason I don't, I was just talking about this on my latest episode, but it's like, I did a whole episode I recorded today, it'll be out tomorrow, on Zuckerberg, on Rogan, admitting that the FBI, like kind of what, at least he was asked about why the Hunter Biden story was buried, and his response was, well, the FBI came and told us there was going to be a bunch of misinformation. So whether the FBI intentionally did that or not, from his perspective, he at least said that this is why they buried the story, because they were told from the FBI. So, say what you will about all the 2,000 Mules shit. I don't really buy into any of that shit, but there's a reason why, Trump supporters believe this, but forget any of that. Even if I grant you that, okay, it's a complete cult to believe, that Donald Trump didn't win the election. He completely lost it. There was no foul play, all of that. Okay, fine. But this is your bias showing that you see that as a cult, but don't see it as a cult when 60% of Democrats believed that Donald Trump didn't really win the election, but Vladimir Putin interfered in the election, and that's why he was in there. So at least acknowledge that this is not just one side. This kind of goes back to the point I was saying. It's like, no, these are all cults by your own definition of it. So that's okay, fine, but you can't be the party of Hillary Clinton and Stacey Abrams and then be outraged that the other party doesn't believe the results of an election. That's just bullshit.
Excellent point. So, and by the way, I would just say that with the Zuckerberg thing, for me, which has been really interesting, is to kind of tie in the legal aspect. The libertarians, hey, it's a private company, bro. Well, now you're talking state action, and I don't care if you think that Dan Berman or Dan, the taxman hat guy, made a comment about, thank you, made a comment about well, it could be in their terms of service and I'm like, you don't have that. And once you start having the government telling you what to do, and whether you think it's in their terms of service, that's now you're talking about First Amendment violations. So you've got completely different aspects. And by the way,
any libertarian at this point who's still arguing something about how they're a private company and blah 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 I think should be completely dismissed as a clown. I mean, also if you have a big goofy hat on, you should probably be dismissed as a clown. But anyone who doesn't see what's going, they have no idea what's going on. They're not paying attention at all. This has nothing to do with private companies deciding some people shouldn't be on their platforms. This is all complete pressure. As soon as the government hauled all the heads of the tech companies before Congress and started threatening them, and then you have the press secretary, the former press secretary Jen Psaki, saying that they gave lists of people who should be kicked off these sites. That you have Alex Berenson showing that the White House asked about why he hasn't been kicked off Twitter yet before he got kicked off. Now you have Zuckerberg saying all this. I mean, come on, dude. To sit here and make excuses for this is blatantly government cracking down on the free speech of the American people. There's no argument against it.
None at all. And by the way, just random things I ran into at Reno. I came upon Dan taking a picture in his hat, taking a picture of Nick Sarwark accepting some sort of award. Just things
He won't be getting one at the next convention. I can promise you that.
Not quite as good as coming upon you and Dr. Paul, but that's what we have.
Conspiracy theory about illegitimate elections to a Democratic one.
Yes. Well, the Dems have always had conspiracy theories whenever they lost. Okay. You just go back to the last 50 years in every election.
Okay.
This one was slightly different because it ended up at the Capitol. Yep. But yes, of course, they're going to. I'm worried that if a Republican genuinely wins, say in 24, whoever it is, maybe DeSantis, hopefully not Trump, that the Dems won't accept it. They'll just say, nah, we know they were doing this behind the scenes and the gerrymandering, this and that. This was all illegal. And then what? then we're in trouble.
Well, although I suspect Skeptic magazine's circulation is going to go up.
I don't know.
Or it's going to go out of business, one or the other, right?
I find most people, they're not that interested in the truth. You have to kind of remind them why this is important. I feel like Liz Cheney sometimes, standing up there going, what actually happened matters. Right. Reality matters, right? And I mean, what a funny thing. I mean, she's my hero. And I don't agree with her on almost everything. Right. Politics, right? She's pro-life.
Do you hope, do you hope people are becoming more independent-minded? I mean,
that would help, yes. Yeah. I like Andrew Yang's idea of a viable third party. Of course, he's not the first, but he's a forward party. I like this idea. Right. I'm not a big UBI guy, but I think the duopoly. He talks about the duopoly. Germany, where my wife's from, they have 6 or 7 parties that are viable parties. No one gets more than 50%.
Okay, we're done there. So, what if he?
I wish we had a third party. I wish we had a third party for these libertarians with their libertarian ideas. Too bad.
I read a book back in the 90s. It was talking about how Europe was taken over by the extreme left because they had so many parties that it was easy to get a small faction in there. So I understand that. But what's your take on his Liz Cheney hero worship?
I mean, I don't know what the fuck do you even say. This is where having mushy gobbledygook nonsense with no logic ends up getting you. And this is, by the way, what like Andrew Yang has said before too, that it's like, well, let's have kind of like the conservative Democrats and the liberal Republicans, and we'll all kind of meet in the middle with common sense. And where do you end up with Liz Cheney? Oh yeah, there's all these people who are involved with a cult, and I don't really agree with Liz Cheney on anything, but at least she stood up against her own party. She had all this courage to take this position, which will guarantee her probably $30 million a year salaries at whatever job she, ends up at after this. And so, yeah, we'll just support the person who was all for, literally played a role in the State Department in arming fucking Islamists in Syria, was trying to work for regime change in Syria and Yemen, advocated for torture, you know what I mean? Like, advocated for every last one of these wars. There we go. There's the nice moderate middle position. Now we're not in a cult anymore. We're just in a group of people who are trying to slaughter millions of people in the goal of remaking the Middle East into a modern Jeffersonian republic. Good thing we got out of that cult.
Right. And by the way,
this is where it ends. When you have no first principles, you have no understanding of what the counter arguments are, you have no logical reasoning. This is where it ends. Just with the worst of the worst.
Never do the bidding of the regime. I think that's the new motto. And by the way, what's your take now, the most consistent motherfucker, on this gentleman whose consistency is his ultimate goal? What's your take on this whole interview?
I mean, I guess I'd leave it with what I started it with. It was just like, it's unbelievable. Like I said before, it's unbelievable that any of the guys just in our sphere, in our camp, have so much more of an understanding of the actual arguments they're putting forward than this guy who's put forward as Mr. Argument. Mr. Rationalist. I'm not the religious guy. I'm the skeptic. I base everything on science and just pure logic and rational thought, and has just no idea. There's just no principles involved, no sense of actually taking on what the argument from the other side is. It was just, again, I don't hate the guy or anything, but it was just I'm kind of blown away by how weak it all is. And it makes me think about there's something about this kind of internet age where there's this podcasting world where back in the day, this would be the guy who's put up there as the skeptic, Right. This would be the guy who's got, and then you'd have to take that, that's the best you can have, is this guy is the skeptic. But now everybody can go to all these different platforms and see where it's I don't know, dude, you're not saying anything. Through this whole interview, I don't think he said anything, at least from what I've seen. I watched the first 20 minutes of it and then all the clips you've shown here. I have not heard him say anything through this whole thing.
Now, I did cherry pick a little bit. So there's some stuff out there that was frustrating because
he doesn't believe in transgenderism and wokeism or something like that. Yeah. Okay. All right.
There you go. So that was frustrating. So look, Dave, I really appreciate you coming on. I just thought I would ask one. You can plug your OnlyFans. I know that's out there. Quick, how do we deal with the disaffected people in the LP, like the Martha Bueno OnlyFans type of situation?
Oh yes.
we had a spy go in and take it wasn't what you thought. But what do we do?
I have no idea what you're talking about. But dear
really?
God, I don't want to know what a spy got on this information.
Do you know she got an OnlyFans? Much like you, she got an OnlyFans page for the dirty politics to raise money.
All right, so that's fine.
We're done.
Best of luck to her.
How do we deal? Since you're kind of in this party thing, and we'll go off from here. But how do we deal with like the disaffected in the party to heal or to pull them along or to do whatever? I don't know.
I mean, look, there's a portion of the party who are just like their identity has become opposing what we are now, and that's fine. I don't care. I'm not gonna like stress. My goal is not stressing about like trying to win back over the like 400 people who are online who make their whole identity about hating the Mises Caucus takeover of the Libertarian Party. I just don't care. I think we should be really awesome. And if some of those people go, shit, this is pretty awesome, and want to get back on board, that's awesome. But the way I look at it, that would be great. But the way I look at it is that like what I'm in the business of doing is trying to like speak to the most influential people like that I have good relationships with, trying to get more relationships with even with other influential people, get my message out there in front of millions and millions of people. I want to try to have 100,000 new members to the Libertarian Party in the next year. Whether the 400 who left and are upset about that come back or don't come back, I'd rather they come back. But if they don't, they don't. They want to keep bitching on Twitter about it, then keep bitching on Twitter about it. My goal is that like I see there's this like huge new movement of the kind of like anti-establishment alternative voices out there in the world, and what I want to do is get on all the biggest platforms and put our ideas out there at the forefront of these biggest platforms. That's my concern. Whether there's some libertarians who agree with me on 90% of things but are so furious about the 10% they don't agree with me on, okay, great. I just don't care. Like, that's the honest truth. I just don't care. I want all of them to be on board, but what I'm looking with this thing now that we've taken over the party, and we've really only had it for a couple months, and we've really only had our team in place for like a month now. Okay. I have like big plans for this whole thing, and I don't care. I don't care about like the tiny little bit of numbers of people who are gonna like keep bitching and complaining about it. That's fine. They can keep doing that. Best of luck to you. Keep bitching. You guys bitched the whole time as we marched through this party and took it over. Keep bitching now. See how that works out for you. We're going to do something really fucking big with this party. And so that's fine if you don't want to be a part of it. I just have no issue with that. My issue is like making this way bigger than it's ever been before. So that's where my focus is.
A man with such a big plan that he's decided to run for president just to get the blue check on Twitter. I know that's the goal.
That's all I care about.
That's what's going. Dave, once again, thanks. Plug anything you have, and then we'll head out. And I appreciate once again you coming in.
Oh, thank you, Tyler. I really enjoyed it. Part of the problem, Comic Dave Smith on Twitter. comicdavesmith.com is my website. That's all.
You do have an OnlyFans, so let's not forget that, everybody.
But my OnlyFans has been defunct for a long time. They stopped paying me to do it.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for joining in. I'm sorry I didn't read any of the comments. I wanted to focus on what we had here with Dave. Dave, once again, thank you. People subscribe out here. Go find all Dave's content. And I would implore you to go and watch this whole interview because there's some good nuggets in there, even if he's really misguided. Dave, hang on. I've got an unnecessarily long outro, and thanks everybody.
Okay, I'm leaving now. Bye, guys.
But she's back.
And now.
Chick-fil-A is completely overrated. It's not that good. I prefer Zaxby's. I prefer Popeyes.
Takes a tough man to make a tender forecast, Nick. And I guess that's me. Keep fucking that chicken.
Should I vote for Dick Cheney on the Libertarian Party? Do I have an obligation to vote for Dick Cheney?
I would say so.
Yes.
Did it work for those people?
No, it never does. I mean, these people somehow delude themselves into thinking it might, but it might work for us.
That one dude was like, not a podcast. I can't find it anywhere. And they don't have video.
Oh, yeah, Peter Janke. Yeah.
Yeah, I blocked him.
I'll do it. If he unblocks me, I'll...
He'll buy your shirt if you unblock him, Bert.
He's a wigger.
Yeah, nothing cooler than
So
a
he's
49-year-old woman.
like,
I just started live streaming. Cut me some slack. I'm pretty high tech for a boomer. But
For
anyways,
a boomer.